You're listening to the Better for America podcast, presented by Amac, the Association of Mature American Citizens.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rebecca Weber. This is your AMAC podcast, Better for America. Today, we have with us someone who has been in the media, and he is so close to conservative national leaders. He's a national leader himself, and he has been, from a remarkably young age, Mr. Ben Ferguson. And Ben is someone who has helped shape national opinions. He's drawn out views of national experts. He helps AMAC members every week, and he interviews decision makers. And at the same time, his expertise, his insight, his analysis of what we're so privileged to have at our disposal today is Ben Ferguson. I'm so excited to have you with us, Ben. Thank you for being here.
It's so fun to be with you, and Happy New Year to you and everyone that's watching and listening today. I think this year is going to be a really, really big year for conservatives. And I'm excited to see what happens with the coming midterms, because we just got some new numbers. And I don't know if you've seen these, Rebecca, but they're the biggest cities and states that Americans fled this year were all Democratic-run states with the new data for 2021. Massive exoduses from places like New York, New Jersey, California, Michigan. And people aren't just leaving big cities. They're leaving big states. And I think that means there's big things to come this year for conservatives.
I'm excited to hear more about that. And before we jump into that, I do want to hear a little bit about your predictions. I want you to share a little bit about your background, because I find your background, Ben, so inspiring. And it really is just a great message, especially as people are sort of thinking about what they want to do in 2022. You come with a really remarkable pedigree. At the age of 13, Ben, 13, you became the youngest radio talk show host in the country. And then again, 20, you were the youngest ever syndicated. So if you could please share with us a little bit about, what got you in the game at such a young age, and to hosting your own show today and really helping spread the word about our Constitution, about our national sovereignty and all of that good stuff. Tell us a little bit. Bring us back.
It's interesting, my story now, and I think it's so relevant now compared to what even in just the last 5 or 10 years. When it's unique. I started when I was 13, but I think it's so much more relevant now because I hope it inspires parents and grandparents to realize that many on the left are indoctrinating your children at a very young age in the public school system, and we're not countering it. And your kids don't have to be 18 years old to talk politics, to talk freedom, to talk democracy, to understand what tyranny is, to understand history and what happened in Germany, what happened in World War II, what happened in World War I, what's going on right now in China, what's happening in Russia, what's happening in the Middle East. And really, I now look back at when I started radio at the age of 13. It happened by pure accident. My mom was in the car. She was listening to a radio show. And this was before talk radio was kind of really conservative based. When they had, talk stations in America in 92, 93, it was basically left and right shows that would come on one after the other. And there was a lady that was screaming at Republicans in Congress in 1993, 1994 with the school lunch program. And Richard Gephardt held up a bottle of ketchup. It was one of those made for TV moments. And he held up that bottle of ketchup and he said, "Is this what Republicans are going to consider a vegetable for our children in America with school lunch programs?" And it went bonkers online, right? This is before things went, viral now on social media. And I was listening in the back seat and I said to my mom, I was like, "There's no way that's true." Now, I wasn't thinking about politics from being a Republican or a Democrat. I had no idea the concept of what that was. I didn't have a concept of what the right and the left was. I understood one thing, right and wrong. And it seemed wrong to take away kids' school lunches. It would be wrong to look at a bottle of ketchup as a vegetable. But I also thought it was wrong that a politician would say that. I didn't believe that people would be that, I guess you'd say, mean or inhumane. And my mom used as a teachable moment. She said, "Ben, why don't you call our congressman? And why don't you find out if the Republicans are really trying to cut school lunch program money?" So I did. My dad had a fax machine. Remember the old roll paper that would roll off and fall on the floor? It wasn't done normal sheets of paper. And I called the congressman's office. I asked him to fax me a copy of the bill. Now, my dad was not happy with me because I used all of his fax paper. As you know, congressional bills are extremely long and have a bunch of stuff in them, and they're pretty much absurd. They make laws so that it's hard for you to even understand them. I read the entire bill. And the next day I called into this talk show and I said to the host, I was very literal, right and wrong, right? Lying is bad. Telling the truth is good. I'm a young kid. And I said, ma'am, I think you owe your audience an apology. And she immediately started yelling at me. Why? I said, well, you lied to your audience yesterday. She said, well, what did I lie about? And I said, you said that Republicans were trying to cut school lunches of children and they were going to go hungry. And you said that Richard Gephardt was right when he said that the Republicans are so evil that they're going to consider a bottle of ketchup to be a vegetable. And I said, it's not true. And she started yelling at me. And I said, ma'am, have you read the bill? And she said, well, no one reads the bills. And I said, well, I did. And maybe you should too. And I proceeded to read her what the bill actually said. Now, if you read the bill, what it told you was Republicans wanted to increase funding for school lunches by 3.7%. Democrats wanted to increase it by 4.1%. The Democrats were calling the difference in the two increases a cut. And that's how they played politics. And after kind of schooling her on the facts, and I wasn't trying to win. I just had the facts. I read the bill. Another show heard this and played that audio after that show on their show and immediately said, if anyone knows who this person is, this kid is, we want to talk to him. So my parents' phone started ringing at home. This is like pre-cell phone day. And wow. They said, they're talking about you they're talking about Ben on the radio. Call in. So I called in and the host talked to me. They're like, how did you find this out? And I said, I called the congressman's office, yada, yada, yada. And they're like, have you ever seen a radio studio? And I was like, no, I never have. And they said, well, you want to? I was like, of course, I want to see a radio studio. And they said, put your parents on the phone. So I handed the phone to my mom and they were like, hey, bring him down to the studio tomorrow for 10 minutes. Long story short, that 10 minutes turned into an hour and a half. The next day, being a guest on their show, the phone lines were jammed. They had me come back the next day. The phone lines were jammed again. A week later, they hired me. And as they say, the rest is history.
Wow. It really is very cool because it's like the embodiment really of the American dream. If you think you can do something, do it. You likely can do it. If you fail, try again. And look at what's happened over these years, over these decades, really, Ben. In a way, I almost feel like I've sort of watched you grow up, so to speak, when I met you over 10 years ago. And Dan saw in you a rising star. And now today, look at all of that, what you're doing. It's just amazing. Thank you so much for being a great example and really being another example of how great this nation is, that really, if you put your mind to something, you can do it.
Well, and I think it's so important that parents understand that you need to start taking the initiative to educate your kids about our history, to educate your kids about the Constitution, to educate your kids about what rights are, what they mean, because you may think that your kid is not being indoctrinated right now in our public school system or even the private school systems. Right. I'll give you an example. My hometown of Memphis, Tennessee, the University of Memphis announced today that they are going to pay bonuses to teachers that add critical race theory to their curriculum, $3,000. So they're bribing with tax dollars because the public university, these dollars are public tax dollars that go to fund the university. They're bribing the teachers to teach propaganda, racial propaganda, and to teach white guilt, and to teach that you should be angry about the economic system in America to these kids in college, and they get now a bonus with your tax dollars to do it. And I use that example as to say, if you think this isn't happening in our public schools, you're not paying attention. But one of the things that we have stopped doing in this country is as conservatives, we have stopped teaching our kids and our grandkids about what is right and wrong. Go back to what I was like when I was 12, 13. You don't have to teach Republican and Democrat. You don't have to teach conservative liberal. You can teach the fundamentals of right and wrong, what our country stands for, what it's about, what it means, and what our founding fathers believed in. And that's why I say, I hope my story now is relevant and inspiring, because we stopped teaching our kids the fundamentals, the basics of what it means to be an American, what American history is, and what our founding fathers believed in, which was truly in freedom. Look at mask mandates, look at vaccine mandates, look at this Biden administration right now with children. They have declared a war on your parental rights. They have declared in this country with these new vaccine mandates for children that they're about to go after hardcore, that your kid will not be able to participate in society unless you submit to the government. In other words, you don't have parental rights. You don't own your children anymore. Your children are property of the state, and we get to decide what is best for your children. All over the country today, kids were sent home for not wearing masks. Now, what you're telling these children when they walk in the door is, when you walk in our door, we get to supersede the parental decisions that your parents have decided. If your parents said you didn't have to wear a mask, they are wrong. And you will wear this mask because we own you. You are property of us. You are property of the school board. You are property of this district. You are property of the state, and you're property of the United States of America. And that's where we are right now. And people need to wake up.
Yeah, it's so important that people recognize it and see it for what it really is. And that's what it is. And I think a lot of parents, it's easier to convince yourself that these kinds of things aren't happening. Pay attention. And I also suggest that people listening, re-educate yourself. It's been a long time for many of us since we've sat in a school setting. And I found the Hillsdale College free sort of online courses.
Their online course of the Constitution is unbelievable what they've done at Hillsdale College. I totally agree with you.
I mean, everybody and anybody listening, you can go to Hillsdale, you can go online and you can sign up for their free educational courses. You can listen to them. I listen to them at night often. I'll put my headphones in. They're excellent. And it really does remind us of what the intention was all along with our founding fathers. This was not the way that they saw America to be. And so it's up to us, the American people, to push back. Then I do want to quickly shift. I want to ask you about some national issues. You mentioned them a few minutes earlier. And I know that you see a lot of this every single day. So I do want to look at the economy. What do you think about the Biden administration, their energy policies? Let's start there.
Yeah.
We were energy independent. And then they made this strong push towards socialist legislation, which is really overspending. It's driving inflation. So we're seeing people who Biden promised people making under $400,000 would not pay more in tax, but we're certainly paying more at the pump. Tell us what you're seeing.
Look, I tell people when you talk about the economy and you're trying to convince others and explain to them what's actually happening right now, you've got to break it down in a very simplistic way. The reality is, if you made $50,000 1 year ago, that $50,000 now is worth about $44,500 because of inflation, because of the price of gas, because of the price of transportation, because of the price of food. So if you think that your $50,000 is worth the same that it was last year, your salary is the same, it's not. You have lost $5,000 to $5,500 in buying power. And this year it's going to get worse. Look at the price of used cars right now. The average American, for the first time in history, since they've been keeping these numbers, it came out yesterday, Edmunds.com came out with this. The average American on a salary of about 60,000+ cannot afford a used car right now in this country because the prices of used cars have skyrocketed to an average of $39,000. Now, you think you can afford a new car right now, you probably won't be able to either. With taxes now, the median price of a new car is $50,000 with tax, title, and license. This is the Biden administration and what they've done to the American people. Now, you look at gas prices, and let's take that as a sector out of the overall equation for a moment. It was very purposeful. It was not accidental what Biden did. I will remind you, and you got to connect these dots. When Joe Biden was the vice president under the Obama administration, they had an energy secretary that actually said that the Biden administration's agenda, the Obama administration's agenda and goal was to make American gas prices go to the equivalent of what they were in Europe. At the time he said this at a conference, the average gas price then was about $7 a gallon in Europe because they buy by liters. It was $2, $3, $4, depending on where you were, a liter. So it was $7, $8, $9 a gallon in Europe at the moment when he said that. Why did they believe this? Because they want to force you into submission to live your lifestyle the way they demand, which is either A, you go out and buy an overpriced electric car, B, you start working in groups to drive to work and totally just get rid of your car, or you get on public transportation to, quote, save the environment. Joe Biden believed in it back then when he was the vice president. He advocated for it. They went after things and used your tax dollars on things like Solyndra and other green alternative energy companies, and they wasted hundreds of billions of your tax dollars backing these companies that all failed and made their friends rich. Joe Biden becomes president. He believed in it then. He's going to do the same thing now. It was the same exact policy. Shut down every pipeline, shut down offshore drilling, make sure that we are totally dependent on foreign oil. Now, there's a cause and effect. Russia now has a lot of money they would have never gotten their hands on. Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, China, all of these countries now have a significant increase in the amount of disposable cash to support either taking over different parts of the country, Taiwan and other places like that, or Ukraine, like we're seeing with Russia right now, because now they have the influx of money to expand their power and reach. So there's a reason why you shouldn't have done it just from that standpoint, but also in the Middle East to support state-sponsored terrorism, to support groups like Hamas and Hezbollah and Al-Qaeda. If we know anything about the Middle East, we know that many of these rogue nations, when they have a lot of money, they support terrorism. And when they don't, by default, they stop supporting the terrorist operations. So not only did you embolden our enemies and make them more powerful, you made them more financially sound, and it's allowed them to then support people that are literally chanting death to America. This is our energy policy. It's not just about the gas pump. I would argue it's about national security. And we're seeing the supply chain issues and the price for the economy. Now, if there's any good news that comes out of this, I think it's this. I think Americans are waking up clearly, and they're wanting basic freedoms back. You look at what I mentioned at the beginning of the show about people moving. Top 5 states people ran from were liberal Democrat states. Top 10 municipalities that people left, like cities like Chicago and St. Louis and DC and San Francisco and LA. All the top 10 were Democratic run cities that had lockdowns and mandates that were put in on people. People are running to freedom. And I think it's going to be a bloodbath for the Democrats in the primaries because of this.
Well, that's what we're predicting here at AMAC. We do think that we're seeing a red conservative wave on its way. It's almost as if all of the things that the Democrats have done, a lot of their bad policies, but also the rhetoric is really backfiring. Things like the culture war. We saw what happened in Virginia. Parents said, no. Critical race theory exists, all while mainstream media tried to ignore and actually came out with quotes like, it's not there, they're not teaching it. So we need to be smarter than mainstream media. We need to look ahead and be hopeful. And I think that you're right, Ben. I think that a lot of this is going to wake up America, and we're going to vote the right people in office. Let's pray that that happens. I do want to come back to another issue that I think is a little closer to home and get your predictions for the year ahead. So we have seen some remarkable cases accepted by the Supreme Court this year, in particular cases that could lead to the reversal of Roe v. Wade. And then, of course, we're seeing an expansion, I guess, of the Second Amendment rights and discussion of Second Amendment rights by the Supreme Court. And there are other cases that are also important. Now we're seeing this 5-4 or maybe 6-3 conservative majority, depending on how you count the numbers.
Yeah.
I think could happen in 2022, especially on the issue of abortion.
Look, I think what you saw in Mississippi and the abortion law in Mississippi and also the abortion law in Texas is they fought this the smart way. If you look back at Roe v. Wade, you're looking at in the Supreme Court, if you actually read Roe v. Wade, and people need to read it, okay? It's very simple to read, and it's very clear what the Supreme Court said with Roe v. Wade. They said, look, we are going to side with the mother early on when they believe that the child is not viable outside the womb, based on modern medicine at the time, in the early 1960s. Then they said, early 1970s, late 60s. So they were looking at data from 1969, 1970, 1971. Look at viability of an adult life from the 70s, 1970 to 2021. Look at the numbers. Look at how many more years an average woman lives in America and an average man. Because of modern medicine, we live longer. With that, modern medicine has become amazing things with children that are born prematurely. We can now keep a child alive at a much, much younger age, a much lower number of weeks outside of the womb than you could when Roe v. Wade was being decided. If you look at Roe v. Wade, they said in the second trimester, we're going to let the states kind of decide on this. But in the third trimester, in the late second trimester, we're defending the right of the child to live and not the right of the mother to choose. And so if you look at what these states did, they said, we're not trying to overturn Roe v. Wade, just saying abolish it. We're trying to challenge the science within the law. And we believe the science proves that a child can be alive at a much younger age. So therefore, we are putting in a fetal heartbeat law, for example, that says when you can detect a fetal heartbeat of a child, we believe that child at that point has a right. And we believe that that child has the right to live. And the mother's right to choose at that point disappears, which is why they're going 8 weeks or 12 weeks, depending on which state you look at. I think what you are going to see is maybe the Supreme Court doesn't just flat out throw out Roe v. Wade. Okay. I think that would be at this point, probably more of a pipe dream. But what I do believe they're going to do is they're going to say states have the right to decide when they want to start protecting life, especially when it's early on. And we are going to allow the child's rights to supersede the mother's rights for a longer period of time during the pregnancy. And what this will do in places like Mississippi and places like Texas, and then many other conservative states are going to follow suit, is they're going to make it where the number of abortions that take place in this country would drastically be reduced nationwide. And Planned Parenthood, the number one abortion provider in the country, will lose out on the opportunity to murder, in my opinion, millions of children every year because we are looking at this science and we are challenging Roe v. Wade within the confines of the law, saying the law is there. We want you to look at the science and how we can protect life outside the womb. And that is where I think if we would have done this 20 years ago, the number of lives we could have saved, I wish that we would have just fought it this way early on and not just said, we want to totally overturn Roe v. Wade, because we can save so many lives immediately. And the science behind this backs up the decision-making. I think that's where you're going to see the Supreme Court go. And it's going to save countless American lives every year.
Yeah, I pray that is what happens. I think that you're right about the science. Science has brought us so far and taught us so
No
much.
doubt.
We're able to do in vitro surgeries and see babies as early as 18, 19 weeks, conduct surgeries on babies in the womb. This medicine and science has brought us so far. So we do know that there's viable life in the womb. And for those that are sort of freaking out, for lack of a better word, that are thinking, oh my God, abortion's going to be illegal. That's not exactly what this is about. This is about empowering the states to make those decisions. And then if you don't like the state that you live in, go live in a state that wants to do abortions right up until the 9th month, with New York being one of them, which is absolutely terrible when you think about it. But this is an issue that's so personal to me. I feel that it's a priority. I know AMAC members are behind life entirely and support life from natural conception or from conception to natural death. So we're going to continue to fight on those issues and keep people, abreast as to what happens.
And you mentioned New York real quick, and I think what you're going to see from the Supreme Court is they're going to rein in states that are clearly siding solely on a, quote, women's right to choose over the life of the child. And that's going to rein in states because they're going to declare that a child's rights must be respected at a much younger time in the pregnancy, and that you can't just ignore the child, because Roe v. Wade did not say ignore the child. You go read Roe v. Wade, the legal opinion that was given down by the Supreme Court, the ruling, it gave clearly rights to the child at the point where they believed that there was viability outside the womb. And that number needs to change. And so liberal states like New York are going to be in for a rude awakening when the Supreme Court, I think, makes this new rule and says, okay, we're changing it. The law may stand, but we're changing the context of the law in a significant way.
Yeah. And for those listening too, for anyone who thinks that when Roe v. Wade was first passed, that it was all about, giving more rights to the mother, I'm going to say follow the money. This was all about abortion for profit. And we'll see how things do wind up sort of rolling out and how that impacts Planned Parenthood. But make no mistake, they make millions and millions of dollars in this business of taking
hundreds of millions.
No
And, and,
question about
and,
that.
I will also give you a side note for people. The former head of Planned Parenthood is now a paid contributor at CNN, giving medical advice on COVID vaccines, specifically with children. So if you don't think that media is connected directly with Planned Parenthood, I mean, why would you pick the former head of Planned Parenthood to be a COVID expert on vaccines and vaccine mandates and mask mandates for children? Follow the money. There's big money connected with COVID. There's big money connected with abortions as well.
That's right. And Ben, I do appreciate your time. I have two more quick questions before we let you go today. I
Yeah.
want to ask you a little bit about how do you assess the state of modern media, essentially the role of big tech in our political process? Because some would say that our First Amendment is under assault. People are being censored everywhere we turn, and others may not see it as much of a big threat. Here at AMAC, we certainly see how we are censored, how our voice is quieted. But there do seem to be a lot of maybe private actors in the high tech space that are filtering.
Well, I mean, just look
Where
at the reach. Look at the reach of your page. Look at the reach of my page. Look at the reach of other conservative pages on Facebook. You know, I used to do a Facebook Live and I'd have 15 to 20,000 watching live. Now, if I do a Facebook Live, I have 7, 8, 900 watching live with 1.2 million followers. That's an algorithm change. That's censorship in real life. When I used to go live, it would be immediately 17,000, 18,000, 20,000. A bad number of views for me was 250,000. Normal was 500,000. Good number of views for any video I did was 1 million. Now, if you reach 50,000, it's a great video. I'm not the only one. You guys have seen this as well. But I do think I have to blame conservatives for this one. Republicans have not fought back hard enough. They complain about it, but they've done nothing to rein in big tech. And if Republicans get control of the House and Senate, they better rein in big tech, because many times they don't do it. They complain about it. They run off the election of it. It's like the conservative candidates that always run off of, I'm going to give your kids a better education, I'm going to lower crime, and they don't do it and they run off of it again. You need something to run off of, right? So many of these conservatives, I don't believe, have any intention of actually reining in big tech. Many of them claim they do, but they don't. And there's, luckily we're seeing a move. You look at Getter, for example, that is kind of the Twitter alternative when it comes to freedom. Joe Rogan, who's the #1 podcaster in America, who has more people listen to his show than watch anybody on cable news, including ABC, NBC, and CBS's nightly news combined. The guy has a bigger audience than any late night TV show. In fact, he has a bigger audience than all three combined on a regular basis. Twitter just censored him because he interviewed someone that actually has done vaccines, that is against childhood vaccines for COVID. And they banned his video from YouTube and they silenced his information on Twitter. And he basically, even though he's one of the biggest names out there, he said, I had enough. And he went and joined Getter a few days ago. I think what you're going to see over the next couple of years is people realize, all right, look, I can't beat Facebook. They can shadow ban me. They can mark things as fake news, even though it's not. They can mark things as partially false to limit my reach. They can basically silence me without canceling me altogether. Because if it goes back to saying, if a big tree falls in the forest and no one's around, did it even happen, right? Did it make a loud sound? Well, if you're huge and then all of a sudden you can't reach any of your audience, does it matter how many followers you have? No, it doesn't. And so I think what you're seeing now is with, Trump starting his new social media, and with Getter and Parler and Telegram and other conservative freedom-based sites opening, you're seeing this exodus, because even the big people realize, why am I building something that can be taken away from me in one moment? I spent 10 years building my Facebook following. It's kind of worthless now compared to what it used to be. So am I going to keep investing in Facebook? No, I'm going to go to somewhere where I'm welcome and wanted, where there's freedom. You see, many other sites are now competing with YouTube, for example. And I think we have to vote with our views. We have to vote with our dollars. And we have to support conservatives that have podcasts, whether it's this podcast that we're doing right now, whether it's conservative podcasts like mine, which I hope everyone watching, listening will listen to the Ben Ferguson podcast. But that's how we beat big tech, is saying we're not going to play in your space anymore. But we also have to find elected officials and hold them accountable. If we don't take away the right to censor them, you had a congresswoman that was banned from Twitter, definitely, Major Taylor Greene, that's been banned from Twitter 2 days ago. You look at how she was banned. It should be against the law to ban a congressional leader in Congress from having a place to speak her mind. Now, do I agree with everything she says? I don't, but I do agree with free speech. And I disagree with censorship. I said this a long time ago. You may remember that what was the crazy guy who was Alex Jones was the first man to be banned almost simultaneously from Facebook, from Twitter, from YouTube. I thought he was a kook. I thought he was a conspiracy theorist. I didn't like Alex Jones. I can't stand what he's done. I think he preys off of paranoid people and has made millions doing it. But I believe he has the right to have a voice, especially in the United States of America. And when they banned him, there was a lot of conservatives that celebrated, like, well, good, he was bad for our brand, right? He was tarnishing us. And I said, you watch, this is the beginning of the end of free speech in America, because when you can ban people because you don't like what they're saying, they will come from all of us soon. And sure enough, that's exactly what's happened.
Yeah, it still blows my mind away that a president of the United States of America was banned on these social media
from everything while he was still the president of the United States of America.
That's right. And I do think that 2022, we will see this Truth Social come out. So let's hope it's as good as, Trump, what Trump does. Usually good stuff. We see good stuff.
It's usually pretty good. The amount of money they're putting into it, I don't think it's going to be bad.
That's great. Well, we'll have to sit patiently and wait for that. I do want to ask you one last question, Ben, and you started with some of your predictions here. You interview so many experts, and many of them are really highly versed in politics and the political process. So as you look at the year ahead, do you think, and are you hearing that we may see a flipping of the House and the Senate in your view? Is that likely?
Yes, absolutely. Jeff Rowe, who is a political guy, and you may not know his name, but he runs a incredible company that runs political campaigns for conservative candidates. He's become a good friend of mine, and we were chatting at a Christmas party, and he had just run the governor's race in Virginia and won that incredible race in Virginia. And he was in charge of that. And I love Jeff because he doesn't believe that he's some unbelievable guy that can flip elections per se. He's very good at what he does. He ran Ted Cruz's presidential campaign, but he also respects the people and that it's organic. And he said, what I just witnessed in Virginia was something that could have never happened a year ago, 2 years ago. Doesn't matter who's behind him. This would not have been possible. And what they witnessed is, yes, he ran an amazing campaign and he maximized the outrage of a Terry McAuliffe saying parents shouldn't be deciding what their kids are taught, and they shouldn't be able to say no to what their kids are taught, and they shouldn't be able to go in and say no to certain books in the school system. And basically, the state has your child is the property of the state. Your child's mind is the property of the state. That's what Terry McAuliffe was saying in Virginia. And what you saw was a response from parents and mothers who said, no, you don't own my kid's mind, and you don't get to fill them with propaganda to hate this country. You don't get to teach them critical race theory. We are the ones that give you the money, and we are in charge of the school systems. And the point that Jeff was making is people, I think, are really waking up very quickly to just how damaging the Biden administration is, Nancy Pelosi and others, whether it's Mayor de Blasio, whether it's Gavin Newsom. I mean, you look at the recall of Gavin Newsom. Yes, we didn't get him out of office, but the fact that there was even a recall tells you everything you need to know. The fact that a historic number of people are leaving New Jersey and New York and California and Michigan tells you everything you need to know. So I believe there's going to be a massive conservative wave in the midterm elections. I think just a number of House Democrats that are not even running for re-election tells you they don't want to go down as losers. They're just going to quit. Nancy Pelosi quitting, for example, as Speaker of the House. I truly believe it's because she doesn't want to go down in history as a loser. She wants to, quote, go out on top. And there's going to be a big referendum, but we can't stop in the midterms. This president is going to be still a threat to our freedom and our democracy until the last day he's in office.
Great point. And I do think that this, flipping of the House and, the House and Senate could really be our last chance at hopefully preserving our individual liberty and equal opportunity and all of the things that are so important to America. I do want to ask you, do you see any sort of crazy stories coming out over the next handful of months? Do you think that there might be any stories that shape 2022?
I do. I think the biggest story, and I mean, I say crazy because the idea we're even having the conversation is really crazy if you step back and think about it, is I think what you're going to see from the court system is they are going to slap down these vaccine mandates, these worker vaccine mandates, these mask mandates. They are going to slap them down consistently around the country, because a lot of this is now going to be heard. And I think more of these are going to make their way up the court system and even to the Supreme Court. And Joe Biden is going to consistently lose because they are going over the authority and the power given them in the Constitution. I think in the states, what you're going to see is a big story is that many legislatures are going to rein in these rogue health departments who are elected by no one, that were allowed to do masking mandates and vaccine mandates and mandates on businesses, like you got to sit 10 feet apart. You can only have half occupancy in your restaurants, or third, or you must eat outside, or vaccine passports. I think they're going to consistently lose the entire year on these. I don't think there's going to be a lot of victories for Democrats going, see, vaccine mandates are in fact right, because they're wrong with the Constitution. And I think that's probably going to be the biggest story that will be underreported by the media, is how many times the Democrats get slapped around by the court system because they don't respect and they don't care about our Constitution.
Yeah, we'll have to watch and see what happens there. And I do think that they'd be incentivized to do to invoke more and more fear in people, especially as the 2022 midterm elections and our voting processes are looked at and scrutinized, and ballot harvesting and mail-in ballots, no signature verifications. Remember, all of that, they did all of that
under COVID.
So could that be driving some of this? I think we're smart to ask that question. We'll have to wait and see.
No doubt. I think COVID is going to be around as long as Democrats can keep it around, because it's the most powerful political tool they've ever seen in the history of this country.
That's right. So wash your hands and be safe, get your vaccine, but think twice about letting fear really fill your hearts and your minds, because I think that this is a lot ado about nothing, really, Ben. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You're so reflective, and you've been such a great a voice and a good analysis to the public discussion. So thank you for being such a good friend of AMAC and AMAC members. Thank you so much, Ben. We do want to have you back with us.
Absolutely. Anytime, and Happy New Year to you and the whole team and everybody else watching and listening as well.
Beautiful. Well, may 2022 be a year of positive change and one that recenters our nation. We want to thank Ben Ferguson for joining us today, and to all of you out there for listening. Thank you for tuning in. If you haven't downloaded the AMAC News app, you can listen to today's podcast, plus track breaking news right here. Please make sure to hit that subscribe button, follow, like, and share wherever you are on social media. Until next time, folks, I'm Rebecca Weber. This is your podcast, Better for America. Thank you for being here, everyone. God bless you. Have a great day, everybody. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Better for America podcast. To learn more about AMAC and all it has to offer, visit us at www.amac.us.